Welcome back once again. This is Dr.R.Manimozhi, Assistant Professor of English, A.D.M College for Women, Nagapattinam. The Mother's Day, written by J.B.Priestley, is discussed in this Module 1 about the author, J.B. Priestley. J.B. Priestley was an English novelist, playwright, screenwriter, broadcaster, and social commentator. He was born on 13th September 1894. He started to work as a junior clerk at Helm and Co., a wool firm in the Swan Arcade at the age of 16. He has published articles in local and London newspapers. He established himself in London as a freelance writer with mainly literary work, writing essays, reviews, and biographies. He has achieved remarkable success with his fourth novel, The Good Companions. He died on August 1984. Introduction to the play. J.B. Priestley's Mother's Day is a satirical and humorous depiction of the status of the women, in particular, a housewife in a family. Moreover, a housewife dedicates all her time in the service of her family, but her family takes her service for granted and never take notice of her needs. The family never acknowledge her services or thank her for all that she does for them. Everyone neglects her, and this issue is prominent and relevant today. Many women suffer in silence. Also, the issue of the play raises is genuine. The issue cannot be set by mere changes of the personality of husbands, sons, and daughters. In order to give wise the prize they deserve, the family needs to give them the desired attention. This play brings out the miserable condition of mothers in most homes. A mother works from morning to till night to satisfy the needs of her husband and children. She cleans, sweeps, washes, and cooks, but she gets no reward or praise for her labors. She works like a machine throughout the day, but they never realize that she too is a human being and needs rest. Do we ever think of it? If we don't, we need to censure in some way. This is what this play is all about. See how the mother is working. A mother works like a machine. She do all the works. Characters in the play: George Pearson, Mrs. Annie Pearson, Doris Pearson, Cyril Pearson, and Mrs. Fitzgerald, their neighbor. Let me discuss the characters first. Mrs. Pearson is a loving wife and mother. She is a pleasant but worried looking woman in her 40s. She is very fond of her husband and children. She looks to all their needs. She does her best to keep them happy. Mrs. Pearson is a simple hearted woman, but she is gentle to a fault. She does feel that her husband and children are thoughtless. Annie Pearson's husband and children work for 8 hours a day and 5 days a week. But the poor mother has to work all the hours of the day and all the days of the week. Yet the husband and the children have for her no word of praise or gratitude. But she is too weak to protest. It is Mrs. Pearson's own weakness that has spoiled her husband and children. Mrs. Fitzgerald, their neighbor. She is a strong minded woman. She is older, heavier, and a strong and sinister personality. She is smoking. She has a dominating nature. She believes in equal rights with men. She believes that women have the liberty to do anything that men do. It is very important that Annie Pearson and Fitzgerald have sharply contrasting voices also. Annie speaks in a light, flurried sort of tone with a touch of suburban cockney perhaps. Fitzgerald with a deep voice, rather Irish perhaps. Scene 1. See these two ladies, Mrs. Fitzgerald and Mrs. Pearson, is discussing about some important issue. The action takes place in the living room of the Pearsons' house in London, a small semi detached villa with well furnished living room. It is an early autumn. One afternoon, Mrs. Fitzgerald visits Mrs. Pearson. The two women sit comfortably in the living room. They are playing cards and taking tea. Mrs. Fitzgerald has been telling Mrs. Pearson's fortune. Annie Pearson's problem is that she is excessively fond of her husband and children. She runs after them all the time, takes their orders as if she were the servant in the house, and stays at home every night while they go out enjoying themselves. They have come to believe that she is there simply to wait on them, so they take no notice of her. Mrs. Fitzgerald advises her that she should assert her rights as the mistress of the house, and she wants them to treat her properly. These are all the exact words by Mrs. Fitzgerald. I learnt a lot more, but will you make up your mind now, Mrs. Pearson, dear? Put your foot down once and for all and be the mistress of your own house and the boss of your own family. Mrs. Pearson replied, smiling apologetically, that's easier said than done. Besides, I am so fond of them, even if they are so thoughtless and selfish. They don't mean to be. Mrs. Fitzgerald again she replied, maybe not, but it would be better for them if they learnt to treat you properly. Again, Mrs. Fitzgerald advised her, no doubt about it at all, who is the better for being spoilt, grown man, lad, or girl? Nobody. You think it does them good when you run after them all the time. Take their orders as if you were the servant in the house. Stay at home every night while they go out enjoying themselves. Never in all your life. It's the ruin of them as well as you. Husbands, sons, daughters should be taking notice of wives and mothers, not giving them orders and treating them like dirt. And don't tell me you don't know what I mean, for I know more than you have told me. These are all the words by Mrs. Fitzgerald. And now Pearson, dubiously, I keep dropping a hint. Again, Mrs. Fitzgerald replied her, hint? It's more than hints your family needs, Mrs. Pearson. Now, Pearson, again she is dubiously replying her, I suppose it is, but I do hate any unpleasantness. And it's so hard to know where to start. I keep making up my mind. I have it out with them, but somehow I don't know how to begin. She glances at her watch or at the clock. Oh, good gracious! Look at the time. Nothing ready, and they will be home any minute, and probably all in a hurry to go out again. Again, this lady, Mrs. Pearson, is in a hurrying mood to serve their uh, daughter and son. And now Mrs. Fitzgerald, very coolly, she replies, we change places or really bodies. You look like me, I look like you. This Fitzgerald is giving an idea to exchange their souls to be replaced. Mrs. Pearson, but that's impossible, she replied. Mrs. Fitzgerald told again, it's your only chance. Give me your hands and keep quiet a minute. Just don't think about anything. Taking Mrs. Pearson's hands. Now look at me. They stare at each other, muttering some magical words. Mrs. Fitzgerald asked her to let them wait or look after themselves. Mrs. Pearson says that she can't do it and she is puzzled. At this time, Mrs. Fitzgerald tells her a plan and says that they would change their personalities with each other. She had learnt this art when she was in East. Mrs. Pearson hesitates in the beginning, but Mrs. Fitzgerald holds her hands, asks her to keep quiet and not to think about anything and look at her. The two women stare at each other. Mrs. Fitzgerald recites a spell. Gradually, their personalities change bodies. Now, Mrs. Pearson is bold and domineering, while Mrs. Fitzgerald is nervous and agitated. This little scene should be acted very carefully. We ought to assume that the personalities change bodies. After the spell has been spoken, both women, still grasping hands, go lax, as if the life were out of them. Then both come to life, but with the personality of the other. Each must try to adopt the voice and mannerisms of the other. So now Mrs. Pearson is bold and dominating, and whereas Mrs. Fitzgerald is nervous and fluttering. Now, Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling to Mrs. Pearson, oh, it's happened. Mrs. Pearson, of course, it's happened. Very neat. Didn't know I had it in me. Again, Mrs. Fitzgerald is replying, but whatever shall I do? Mrs. Fitzgerald, George and the children can't see me like this. Mrs. Fitzgerald, now with Pearson's personality, looks down at herself and sees that her body has changed and gives a scream of fright. Mrs. Fitzgerald, but what if we can't change back? It would be terrible. Mrs. Pearson, here steady, Mrs. Pearson. If you had to live my life, it would be so bad. You'd have more fun as me than you'd have as you. Mrs. Fitzgerald, yes, but I don't want to be anybody else. Mrs. Pearson, now stop worrying. It's easier changing back. I can do it any time we want. Again, Mrs. Fitzgerald is replying, yes, but I don't want to be anybody else. Mrs. Pearson, well, do it now. Now, Mrs. Fitzgerald crosses and hurries out through the door, right, left to herself. Mrs. Pearson smokes away, lighting another cigarette, and begins laying out the cards for patients on the table. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this lecture.